Oh, hey, everybody. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on which part of this country that you're in. And welcome to the Rebel Roundup. It's our weekly live show wherein we discuss the news of the week completely unscripted. And what I love about this show is that I just get to opine on the things that I would force my coworkers to listen to. Now you guys get to listen to it, but also we get to interact with you. So I'll tell you what we're doing, then we'll get into the news of the day, or rather the news of the week and the latest Liberal scandals, because there are just so many. So we stream live. We stream live on Rumble, YouTube, Odyssey, and what's the other one? Rumble and Getter. Thank you. But if you want to interact with us, might I suggest you move away from the censorship platform of YouTube and head on over to Rumble and Odyssey, two great free speech platforms that don't really care about your politics, which I think is how it should be. I don't care if they're conservative. I don't care if they're liberal. I just don't want them to care about me either. And on Rumble and Odyssey, you can do something called a paid chat. On Rumble, it's called a Rumble Rant. On Odyssey, it's called a Hyper Chat. And if your paid chat is over the $5 US minimum, I'm obligating myself to read it on air. And maybe you have something you want me to comment on, or you have a question for me, or
just an opinion of your own you want to share with the greater internet, that's your opportunity. But don't let the $5 minimum be your bar for entry. We read frequently chats that are below that $5 minimum and even some interesting ones that are free. So get in there, get chatting, get interacting with each other, and have your say. All right. Let's get into the news of the week. I don't know if you have been paying attention, but boy, have I been paying attention to the lab leak scandal. And by lab leak scandal, I don't mean the Wuhan Virology Institute in Wuhan, China, that has been suspected to be the source of the COVID-19 pandemic. Oh no. What I mean is the problem with Canada's highest level of security biolaboratory. It's in Winnipeg. And what's happening there is crazy. So we have to roll back 6 years. We're finally just getting to the bottom of it, and not even quite, because the people involved are hiding the records. Wouldn't you know? The people involved in the lapse in security there are hiding the records. We go back all the way to 2019 when 2 Chinese nationals were frog marched out of the building and stripped of their security clearance. We go ahead to 2021, we're in the middle of the pandemic, and this happens in, there's a lot of other things going on in the country at the time, including an election. So it didn't get the attention that it deserved. These 2 are then subsequently fired. And now, upon further investigation, it has been revealed that okay, so there's so much going on here. I really have to stop and just sort of explain it to you. What was happening was unauthorized transfers of highly deadly pathogens, including Ebola, were being shipped to China. And Blacklock's has a bit of the story here today that'll give you some of the history, and then we'll go into what Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is saying, and then we'll, of course, then go into Justin Trudeau's reaction. This is like a scandal of unbelievable proportions. This is a real national security disaster. And from what I know about this lab and where it's located, things could be a heck of a lot worse. So, Ian Stewart, the former federal executive, censured for concealing records documenting security breaches at the National Microbiology Laboratory, retired just weeks before Cabinet finally disclosed files in the case. Stewart was the first manager censured by Parliament since 1891. There's no doubt that Ian made a profound contribution, managers wrote in a letter of thanks. Stewart retired January 2nd. Documents he attempted to hide from MPs were released Wednesday, and we'll get to the reaction to those documents and what they contained in Pierre Poilievre's video, but let's keep going. Colleagues credited Stewart with successfully leading the COVID-19 vaccine rollout as the $321,000 a year president of the Public Health Agency of Canada. Now, I am ready to make the case that we should not have the Public Health Agency of Canada. It is so contaminated. It's such a failure. We need to tear it all apart and start again. Let's go down a little bit further in this Blacklock's article. Documents sought by MPs show the Public Health Agency granted top security clearance to 2 Chinese-Canadian scientists at its Winnipeg lab. The 2 were fired in 2021 on proof that they breached security rules, lied to investigators, and concealed contacts in China, including the People's Liberation Army. One of these scientists' name is on a patent for some biotechnology in partnership with the Chinese military. Nobody Googled this scientist before we gave them top security clearance at the Winnipeg Biolab? Let's keep going. Scientists posed a very serious and credible danger to the government of Canada as a whole, and in particular facilities considered high security due to the potential for theft of dangerous materials attractive to terrorists and foreign entities. Said newly disclosed 2021 report on review for cause of security status. Ian Stewart was censured in 2021 on the floor of the House of Commons after defying 4 separate orders. This guy should be in jail. For documents detailing the security breach, he was the first federal manager summoned for censure since 1891. Okay. So let's go into Pierre Poilievre's comments on what those documents that Ian Stewart tried to hide. I wonder what his retirement package was, by the way. But let's go into Pierre Poilievre's, or at least some of the comments. He had like an 18-minute press conference yesterday. And this should horrify all Canadians. Man, I wish he'd get his glasses back. He still looks like Milhouse from The Simpsons. Let's watch some of this because the implications for Canadian security are horrific. And everybody involved should be fired, including Dr. Theresa Tam and the health minister. Let's watch this.
We already knew that Justin Trudeau was not worth the cost, the crime, the corruption, and the cover-up. But now we know that he cannot protect our people or our country. We've just received these documents that Trudeau has been covering up for years. Documents related to a massive security breach at the Trudeau government's most sensitive laboratory, where the most dangerous viruses and pathogens are studied and handled. We have learned that the Trudeau government's head of pathogens was collaborating with members of Beijing's People's Liberation Army who are responsible for bioweapons and bioterrorism. We know now that a People's Liberation Army official was able to gain personal access, walk in the door, look at computers, and have access to all of our most important virological secrets. If you think any of this is hyperbole, read the report yourself. This is from government documents, the Trudeau government's own documents. It says here on page 142, Winnipeg lab scientist Dr. Chu is head of the Special Pathogens Unit, the top person in that job. According to documents on page 242, quote, represents a serious and credible danger to the government of Canada as a whole, and in particular at facilities considered high security due to the potential for theft of dangerous materials attractive to terrorists and foreign entities that conduct espionage to infiltrate and damage the economic security of Canada, end quote. It states further on page 239, investigators assess that Dr. Chu communicated with foreign entities during her trips to China. The evidence obtained from interviews and from information collected from the electronic content of her devices reveal that this is indeed the case. As a subject matter expert with access to sensitive information and dangerous materials, Dr. Chu presents a realistic and credible threat to Canada's economic security when conducting repeated and clandestine meetings with foreign entities, end quote. Then it says Dr. Chu conducted joint research with the Major General Chen Wei of the People's Liberation Army, who, according to page 236, is a noted top virologist at the Academy of Military Medical Sciences and is China's chief biological defense expert engaged in research related to biosafety, biodefense, and bioterrorism. Bioterrorism, end quote. And these are documents, this is right out of the government's own documents. Trudeau, what did he do when he found out about this? Did he immediately inform Canadians of the breach? Did he fire anybody? No, no one was fired. Did he call an inquiry to get to the bottom of it? No, he didn't do that either. Instead, he covered it all up. He defied 4 parliamentary orders to release these documents. When the Speaker tried to get them, he sued the Speaker to cover this up. He said it was all for national security, but now we know from a committee composed of 4 members of Parliament, including 1 Liberal, and 3 judges, and I quote, the information appears to be mostly about protecting the organization from embarrassment for failures in policy and implementation, not legitimate national security concerns, and its release is essential to hold the government to account. In other words, there was no national security reason why we couldn't have had this before. It was only because Trudeau didn't want the embarrassment before an election. So what did he do then? He collaborated, knowing this, he collaborated with Beijing to buy a vaccine for COVID. Could you imagine if the deal that Trudeau wanted to sign with Beijing had gone ahead and we had procured China-made vaccines after learning this information? That's what was in this guy's head. And if you think for a minute, because I know there'll be all kinds of excuses, well, he's not responsible and how could he possibly take ownership of what happens in his government. Let me quote him. He has a document called Open and Accountable Government. And I quote, "As head of government, the Prime Minister has special responsibilities for national security," end quote. It's his responsibility. This is his government's lab. It's not a random university lab. It's the top lab for the Prime Minister's public health agency. And he is exclusively responsible for the machinery of government as Prime Minister of the country. So this is on Justin Trudeau. I will add one last thing. Not only did he cover it up, not only did he try to get a vaccine from China after knowing this, he called a snap election to make sure that the voting would happen before this came out. And what happened in that election? Beijing interfered to help him win it. This is a man who says he admires China's basic communist dictatorship. We cannot trust Justin Trudeau to keep our people and its country safe.
I know that was a long clip, but I think Pierre Poilievre threaded the needle there for you, showed you what was happening at the lab, showed the Chinese collaboration, showed the cover-up, and then also why the cover-up happened and what Justin Trudeau was going to get in kind for the cover-up, and that was help in the next election. And we know that Chinese meddling flipped at least 2 seats in BC and affected close to 12 seats in total in favor of the Liberals. So Justin Trudeau is Beijing's man, not Canada's man. And I think that's pretty clear. However, Justin Trudeau is doing his usual histrionics and denial and basically writing all of this off as a conspiracy theory, even though it's clear there was a cover-up. He hid the documents. We've got the documents now. You can read the documents for yourself. You saw hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents that were hidden. And a snap election was called to ensure that the scandal didn't affect Justin Trudeau's chances in that election. And we also had meddling on behalf of Justin Trudeau by the Chinese government to make sure that Justin Trudeau won the election. Oh, and don't forget, we forgot to throw into the mix there, Justin Trudeau also gave funding to the Wuhan Virology Institute. That's the Chinese military lab that is credibly accused of being the source of COVID-19. He gave them funding to, I don't know, investigate COVID. They investigated themselves and found nothing. That's the Liberal way. Okay, let's go into Justin Trudeau just doing his community theater acting routine, accusing everybody who's a critic of him, despite all evidence, they're a bunch of conspiracy theorists. Look at this.
How is a scientist working on high-security viruses at the National Microbiology Lab allowed to collaborate with Chinese government agencies considered a threat to Canada?
A number of years ago, our security systems, our intelligence and security agencies flagged problems at the Winnipeg labs that were followed up on. We know as a country that increasingly countries like China and others are trying to either influence or get secrets out of our country. And that's why we have to continue to be extraordinarily vigilant about how we're making sure we're doing everything necessary to keep people safe, to keep our research institutions safe. As a government, we've taken many, many initiatives, and I've tasked our National Security and Intelligence Advisor to look even deeper at this Winnipeg's lab situation and make recommendations on how we can move forward appropriately. This is something that people would expect governments to take seriously and expect all parliamentarians to take seriously. Unfortunately, throughout this process, we have seen the Conservative Party, specifically Pierre Poilievre, choosing to spew conspiracy theories and drum up political attacks, partisan attacks, on an issue that, quite frankly, should be bringing Canadians and parliamentarians together to try and solve this. The quickness with which they're looking for partisan advantage is not just undermining Canadians' trust in the system, but interfering with the ability of Parliament to deal with this. One of the reasons it has taken so long to get this report into Parliament is because of the choice that Conservatives made to try and extract any amount of political advantage by drumming up a level of partisanship and toxicity that is not serving Canadians. There's lots of opportunity to have responsible political debates about how we're moving forward as a country and what needs to be fixed, what's being done well, what needs to be done better. Absolutely. That's part of the give and take in our democracy. But the choice to weaponize national security in a way that is rife with conspiracy theories and partisan attacks is a choice that I don't think is worthy of the kind of responsible leadership that Canadians deserve.
Yeah, we care about foreign meddling. That's why we want to hold Justin Trudeau to account for this. It's not a conspiracy theory that there was a cover up there. It's not a conspiracy theory that they were smuggling viruses out of there. It's not a conspiracy theory that these two scientists were working with the Chinese military. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory that China meddled in our election. It is not a conspiracy theory that Justin Trudeau was going to buy a Chinese developed vaccine. None of this is a conspiracy theory. In fact, some of those documents, if you read through them, you can see like workers at the lab, scientists at the lab were sort of joking about how like lax the security is and how crazy it is that they would be sending these things out of the building at all. So, you know, Justin Trudeau can say that it's a conspiracy theory, but I guess what other recourse do you have when you are caught in a conspiracy to cover up your misdeeds? So it's less of a conspiracy theory and more of conspiracy facts. And it's actually much worse than what any of us thought, to be honest with you. I think we can hit an ad break and then we'll go into some Alberta related stuff, including our budget dropped yesterday. It's good and it's bad. Of course, for the NDP, not enough spending. For me, not enough clawing back on spending, but I think they split the baby and sort of people are happy in the middle. So whatever. We'll go into more detail after the break.
Canadians are grappling with news blackouts on social media due to the Justin Trudeau Liberal government's Bill C-18. This new piece of legislation demands that social media platforms pay the government for news shared by users, which is an inconceivable task for companies like Meta and Google. So, as a result, they have decided to preemptively block all Canadian news content, including ours at Rebel News. In response to this, we have since teamed up with VPN provider Private Internet Access to ensure that you can continue to access all of our content across a broad range of platforms while also maintaining your privacy. For only $2 a month, you can bypass Trudeau's new censorship laws while you safeguard freedom of speech and continue to get the news that matters to you the most. Visit piavpn.com/rebelnews to take advantage of the 84% discount and 4 months free. As a bonus, PIA has all of its servers located in the United States, not China, and they automatically delete user data from their servers to avoid leaks and government subpoenas for information phishing expeditions. Don't delay. Head over to piavpn.com/rebelnews to stay up to date on the news in Canada and protect your access to it. Don't delay. You don't want to be left behind.
All right, let's get into the Alberta budget just a little bit. I'll touch on a few things, but I'll have my friend Chris Sims from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation on my show, on the Gun Show on Wednesday, and she'll help break it down for us. There's a lot in there. We kind of have a surplus, but not really. Let me explain it to you. The Alberta budget projects a $367 million surplus. However, the province will borrow cash to meet some of the obligations, according to the headline from CBC. I did read the budget. They're not wrong. But the thing is, the Alberta government has a commitment to grow the Heritage Savings Trust Fund. We want to grow it to $250 billion by 2050. So what they're doing is meeting their commitments to invest $2 billion into the Heritage Savings Trust Fund. And the province is not spending the $5.2 billion surplus from the current fiscal year, which ends at the end of the month. So they're going to put, instead of spending that, they're going to put $2 billion into the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, and the rest is going to a debt repayment, because as you know, the NDP ran up the debt, and now we have these ridiculous debt servicing costs, which, you know, I mean, these are hospitals that could be built, but we're just going to pay it in interest to banksters. So they are borrowing a smaller amount and then paying down the debt with the larger amount. So I get why they did that. I get why they split the baby. Probably makes financial sense. I also don't like the fact that they are increasing the rate of spending in the province. It's not an NDP budget, but it is. I wouldn't call it an austerity budget. That's for darn sure. However, we are getting a tax cut and they're phasing it in over 2 years. And so it's creating an 8% tax bracket, which is kind of exciting for the first $60,000 of your income. They're phasing it in over a couple of years. And the NDP, who raised taxes on literally everybody, are complaining that it is not being implemented fast enough. So I guess the NDP are doing their job of opposing just for the sake of opposing. Okay, but it's weird to hear them argue that a tax break is not coming in fast enough. It's almost like they are just being contrarians for the sake of being contrarians, because they can't find anything that they dislike in this budget, considering that it increases spending and there's borrowing. Now, I want to tell you, there's one exciting thing in this budget before we move on to also the passing of the Sovereignty Act, which is very exciting for me because it is the basically an act to fight with the federal government on almost everything, which brings me a lot of joy as an Albertan. And it's slowly cannibalizing the sovereignty movement here, because it's giving the sovereigntists a lot of the things they already want. But I want to talk about this thing that I saw in the budget yesterday, and it just warmed the cockles of my anti-electric vehicle heart. In the budget, starting January 1st, 2025, and you got to love Danielle Smith, the woman is clever. You know how the federal government wants us all to be in unreliable, expensive, possibly dangerous electric vehicles by 2035, I think it is. They want all new passenger vehicles in this country to be electric, which, I mean, I think it's minus 23 outside right now. And I live like half an hour from the closest town. So I don't know how great that's going to work for me. Try moving hay bales with an electric pickup in minus 25, by the way. But anyways, the federal government wants us all in these unreliable electric cars. Well, Danielle Smith says, okay, fine. If you want to force people into those cars, which I don't think is going to be the case, because we'll see a change in the government long before then. But as of January 1st, 2025, electric vehicle owners will pay an additional annual tax of $200 paid when the owners register their cars. And this move is so clever that it's making me cheer for a tax, which hardly feels like me, but you know, whatever. The tax won't apply to hybrids, but it is applying to fully electric vehicles because, quote, EVs cause more wear and tear on provincial roadways while their owners pay no fuel tax. I think it's great. Now, all of a sudden I realized this is not a brilliant, like it is a brilliant move by Danielle Smith, who loves to fight with the feds on everything, and we love her for it. Saskatchewan did this first. Just like with the Sovereignty Act, they have their, I forget what they call it in Saskatchewan, but they have their version of the Sovereignty Act, and they did it before we did. They also had like a minister of, I think, a provincial autonomy, a deputy minister of provincial autonomy or associate minister of provincial autonomy. It's not a full ministerial department, but just a guy in cabinet whose job it was to shove the feds back out of provincial jurisdiction. And he's been in that job for a couple of years. They've been way ahead of us on the game, but they are like the Oklahoma to our Texas. They are just like us, just a little bit more modest about it. And they're doing these good ideas before us. So Saskatchewan has been doing this to their electric vehicle owners already. And we just sort of poached the idea and did it with a little bit more fanfare. And you know what? They could use the help on the roads. What kind of Albertan would I be if I didn't drag Saskatchewan for their roadway situation there? It's like you pass out of Lloydminster onto the east side and you're like, hang on to your hubcaps, folks, because the roads could use some work. So anyway, Saskatchewan has been doing this already, and we just stole their really great idea, much like we did with the Sovereignty Act, which takes us into this next tweet from Danielle Smith. She says, our legislative assembly just passed the first Alberta Sovereignty Act within a united Canada. And there's a motion calling for several initiatives that will protect Alberta's electricity grid from the federal government's destructive policies and ensure access to affordable and reliable electricity. Oh, I hope she fights hard for this. Alberta's government will continue to use all legal means necessary to oppose the implementations and enforcement of Ottawa's clean electricity regulations, or the CER, on our province. I'm very happy that this is the first use of this Sovereignty Act, which passed in the last sitting. But this is the first time we've actually used it against the feds. As you know, we had a very bad cold snap. I think it was in January. Maybe it was in February. All these cold months blend together in Alberta. And then one day you wake up, it's May long weekend and the snowbank is melting. And it was like minus 53, minus 50, minus 49. Not unseasonably cold, but it was for quite a stretch. And our electricity grid was under strain to the point where we had like an Amber Alert style emergency alert sent to our phones telling us to not run the washer and dryer and to turn off any excess electricity because our grid was under such strain. And when you think about it, it's outrageous that this is what Alberta was faced with, given that we have the world's third largest proven oil reserves. We are the Saudi Arabia of some of the cleanest burning coal on the planet. And we are rich with natural gas. Like when I say that we have a lot of coal, you can pick it out of the ground places. It's in the riverbeds. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's the reason we just like strip mine it, because it's so close to the surface. We don't have like burrowing style coal mines. It's unnecessary. And the NDP, with the collaboration of the federal government, phased us out of coal early. And then the regulatory uncertainty of having an anti-oil government, the NDP, here in Alberta for 4 years meant that nobody wanted to invest in the next best option, and that was natural gas. So now we don't have enough natural gas on the grid. We're stuck with these decommissioning coal-fired facilities, and someplace as energy-rich as Alberta was left with the potential for rolling blackouts in a cold snap, which would be killing. Well, like those are rolling blackouts when it's minus 53 is how people die, how people freeze to death. And so I'm really excited that the first use of the Sovereignty Act will be to fight back and protect the health and welfare of Albertans by protecting our electricity grid. And I should just point out that it was actually coal electricity that saved us during the potential for those rolling blackouts. And that is because our friends in Wyoming and Montana sold us electricity, of course, at a premium because they were in the same cold snap too. And guess how they get their reliable electricity and produce it in a surplus? Well, it's from coal. So they didn't actually get Alberta off coal. They got Alberta off coal jobs because those jobs are in Wyoming and Montana, and they are still selling us electricity. So while our towns like Forestburg and Parkland County, they are, and Hannah, by the way, they're losing jobs. They are, have grief counselors in the mines to deal with people who are, they're underwater on their house. We're just buying coal-fired electricity from Wyoming and Montana. It makes absolutely no sense, but good on us for having our premier do that. Also, on the green energy front, we are putting restrictions on where you can build these massive wind farms. And there has been some pretty serious research into the effects of infrasound, that is the unheard sound created by these massive wind turbines and the down pressure of those blades, and also the living near the constant shadow of these things, this going past your eyeballs all the time. It has some serious effects on living creatures, infrasound, the down pressure, and then the waving of the blades all the time. Sounds like Gitmo style torture to me. But our premier says you just can't build these things over your neighbor's house anymore. We're not going to end up like Ontario. No offense to Ontario, but we don't want, we kind of like it here. we want to keep it that way. So let's go to this video from Premier Smith.
Responsible when it comes to approving applications. Renewables have a place in our energy mix, but the fact remains that they are intermittent and unreliable. They are not the silver bullet for Alberta's electricity needs, and they are not the silver bullet of electricity affordability, because each new development risks driving up the transmission costs and makes Alberta's utility bills even more expensive. So we've been doing the work to ensure that we have clear rules for the regulator, investors, municipalities, and Alberta landowners. And having clear rules means that everyone knows we will prioritize our agricultural lands. That means the AUC will take an agriculture-first approach when evaluating the best use of agricultural lands proposed for renewable development. Alberta will no longer permit renewable generation development on Class 1 and Class 2 lands unless the proponent can demonstrate the ability for both crops and/or livestock to coexist with the renewable generation project. Our government will establish the tools necessary to ensure Alberta's native grasslands, irrigable, and productive lands continue to be available for agricultural production. Protecting Alberta's land is also why we will establish buffer zones of a minimum of 35 kilometers around protected areas and other pristine viewscapes as designated by the province. New wind projects will no longer be permitted within those buffer zones, and other proposed developments located within the buffer zones may be subject to a visual impact assessment before approval. Albertans have been vocal that they don't want large-scale developments to interfere with our province's most beautiful natural features. You cannot build wind turbines the size of the Calgary Tower in front of a UNESCO World Heritage Site, or on Nose Hill, or in your neighbor's backyard. We have a duty to protect the natural beauty and communities of our province. And that includes reclamation, which is why developers will be responsible for reclamation costs via bond or security. The reclamation costs will either be provided directly to the Alberta government or may be negotiated with landowners if sufficient evidence is provided to the AUC, such as money being set aside and held in trust. It is critical that we do not repeat errors of the past and that we have reclamation rules and costs accounted for at the beginning of any development.
That makes me so happy. And you know what? I saw a tweet from Stephen Guilbeault, the federal environment minister, and he's sort of upset that we're not going to allow the contamination of our agricultural lands by these toxic green energy projects. We're not going to allow our beef to be tormented by infrasound and our arable cropland to be contaminated by leaky solar panels. That's wonderful. I guess Stephen Guilbeault is, I guess he's in favor of large scale industrial projects. That's weird. But what's really happening here and what environmentalists won't tell you is that now green energy projects are being subject to the same regulations as oil and gas projects. Most oil and gas projects, in fact, I'm hard pressed to think of one. They all have to set aside money for reclamation and remediation before they can do anything. It's part of the approvals process. That has not been the case for green energy. They could just build a wind turbine and have no concept of what to do at the end of life of that thing. At the end of life of every energy project, it has to be reclaimed. As Albertans, we know what an oil and gas lease looks like after the drilling rig is gone, right? It's just a tiny footprint. It's just a little tiny wellhead, and that's it. It's everything else is reclaimed. The farmer's happy, he's getting royalties. Everybody has seen cattle, horses, livestock, hayfield in and around the little tiny reclaimed lease site because it doesn't affect the wildlife. But these big, huge, massive wind turbines, they torment the wildlife. And so, you know, all we're asking is that green energy be treated the same as oil and gas with a reclamation and remediation fund. You're being treated fairly. So that makes me very happy. It's good. I'm glad. You know, if the hippies can get all up in arms because we want to build a coal mine on the eastern slopes of the Rockies and have that thing canceled because they want to preserve the pristine views of the Rockies, then the same must be said for wind turbines just obscuring the beauty of the Great Plains. I'm so pleased with this policy. I'm not tired of winning here in Alberta. It's great. I think, let's move on to this Scott Moe tweet. Scott Moe is very angry right now with the federal government because the federal government continues to treat people from Saskatchewan unfairly. So his tweet pretty well explains why Saskatchewan is mad. Let's read it together. Those of you who are regular viewers of Rebel News will know that Saskatchewan has a Crown Corporation energy company, and the Crown Corporation energy company, this is one of the rare times that I am ever in favor of a Crown Corporation. They are not collecting the carbon tax from customers in Saskatchewan because Justin Trudeau gave a carve out to people who use heating oil for home heating. Well, guess who those people are? It's not us on the prairies, right? It's largely Atlantic Canada, and the Liberals are not doing so well in Atlantic Canada. Their MPs are hearing it from their residents. And so to save the jobs of Liberal MPs in Atlantic Canada, a carve-out was given for those Canadians. So those Canadians are being treated favorably over those of us in Western Canada who use largely natural gas for home heating. And so Scott Moe said, aha, we have a unique ability to do something about this. And so he did. And the feds are mad at him. I think at one point there was talk about, you know, like sending him to jail or whatever. So let's read what Scott Moe has to say. Again, I bet you in like 4 weeks, well, that's not true. I was going to say, I bet you in 4 weeks, Alberta will figure out how to do the exact same thing, but that's not true. We have created a law that says that we can sort of create our own energy, I don't want to say company, but a Crown Corporation that would sort of be a buffer to protect our producers and retailers, but allow the non-collection of carbon taxes. so that we could do the same thing as Saskatchewan. Again, we're just like, yeah, us too, and we're also going to do it a little bit louder. So many of these good ideas are coming out of Saskatchewan. Let's get into his tweet. It's his response to the federal government threatening to take away the carbon tax rebate for Saskatchewan families. Because let's remember, Saskatchewan also pays the carbon tax on a gazillion other things. This is just home heating. They pay it on vehicle gasoline, farmers, on grain drying. So it's factored into the cost of food, shipping, everything, right? Like the carbon tax is a tax that accumulates all the way down the supply chain. So it's a cumulative collection of tax every step of the way. So anyways, the federal government says they're going to not give Saskatchewan families the rebate because Scott Moe has given them the tax break that other Canadians are getting on their home heating. Even though Saskatchewan has made the decision to no longer collect and remit the Trudeau carbon tax on natural gas, Saskatchewan people are still paying millions of dollars of Trudeau carbon tax, I love how he calls it that, each year on gasoline, diesel, propane, and essentially everything in the supply chain. Yes, yes, yes. So on what basis would they cancel the entire rebate, especially when they are still providing carbon tax rebates to families in Atlantic Canada? Oh, that's such a great point. They're getting a break in Atlantic Canada, and they're also getting the carbon tax rebate. So all Scott Moe is doing is ensuring equal treatment for the people of Saskatchewan. Good for him. Of course, it's ridiculous. And of course, it's a ridiculous and unfair response to Saskatchewan providing tax fairness for Saskatchewan families after the federal government removed the carbon tax on home heating oil primarily for Atlantic Canada. If the Trudeau government follows through on this threat, they will once again be penalizing Saskatchewan families for wanting to be treated the same as other Canadians. But if Saskatchewan people stop getting the rebate entirely, Saskatchewan should stop paying the carbon tax entirely. No rebate, no tax. Friends, we've got ourselves a standoff. Good. Good. I don't think Scott Moe is going to blink. I really don't. Because at the end of the day, what is Trudeau going to do? What is he going to do? Come and put Scott Moe in handcuffs and take him to jail? What is he going to do? All Scott Moe is doing is ensuring that Saskatchewan families are being treated the same as those in Atlantic Canada. Atlantic Canadian families on home heating oil get a rebate, and they had the carbon tax removed from their home heat. I don't know. I think Trudeau's going to blink. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Let's go on to a section aptly called Liberals Being Liberals. This is a story I just can't get enough of. I don't know about you, but I love these pretend Indian stories. Pretend Indians? These fancy, well-kept white people pretending to be Indigenous to advance their careers. Buffy St. Marie. I'm sorry. Beverly Santa Maria. Just a regular old Italian lady from the Eastern Seaboard. Pretending to be Cree lady from a Saskatchewan First Nation. She's not even Canadian. It's just like, I just can't even. And then we had, I think it was a judge, university professors too. They pretend to be Indigenous. It advances their career because, of course, there are Indigenous hiring quotas, race-based hiring quotas. This is what you get. You know, when you have sort of a hierarchy of grievances, and then so you don't award on merit and you don't hire on merit to accommodate the hierarchy of grievances, and you get pretenders. And we're getting one now. It's a Liberal MP. This guy's a real piece of work. His dad has never once said he was Indigenous, and I think his dad was an MP or an MPP. And this guy sat in Trudeau's Indigenous caucus. Like, the Algonquins have basically washed their hands of him and said no. Liberal MP maintains Indigenous identity despite removal from Algonquin group. Mark Saray intends to continue identifying as Métis, says he doesn't need membership in a political association. A Liberal member of Parliament says he'll continue identifying as Indigenous. See, this is the problem. Identify. despite being removed from the Algonquins of Ontario in a recent registry cleanup. The controversial, I don't think it's controversial. Umbrella organization is tightening up enrollment criteria, removing nearly 25% of its electors as it presses to conclude a modern treaty with the Canadian and Ontario governments. But even though Nickel Belt MP Mark Saray is no longer with the Mattawa North Bay Algonquin First Nation, he isn't backing away from his identity. He says he doesn't, of course, because he wouldn't meet the requirements. He doesn't intend to apply to join the Métis Nation of Ontario, which is on the cusp of attaining federal recognition as an Indigenous government. They go into the middle part of this article is just to make sure that you don't read to the end. Like they go into the history of the land claim agreement that they're trying to get into place. But in Saray's case, his root ancestor was listed as, oh Lord, Marie Mitawamekukwi. Okay, I'm really sorry. He has an Algonquin woman born in the 1630s as his root ancestor. This is like those weird things on Facebook that say, did you know that Madonna and Kate Middleton are related? And then they're like, yeah, they have a shared ancestor from like the time of Christ. So, I think this is much similar. Anyways, he claims that this woman is his ancestor. This caught the attention of University of Ottawa professor Daryl LaRue, who questioned Saray's claims during the 2019 election. So because so many people are claiming that this one woman was their ancestor, the Algonquins basically said, no, you have to have like a shared, like a genealogical link to an Algonquin family, like sooner, not that far back. And so I read into this before because this is just crazy. But I read into this before, and this guy's dad was also a politician, and never once did he claim that he was Indigenous, ever once. It just became a thing that Saray claimed, and then Saray was in the Justin Trudeau's like Indigenous caucus, and apparently his only tie to Indigenous ancestry is this woman that he claims he's related to from 1630. That's his only Indigenous tie, is like 400, like from the 1630s. Like, anyway, but this is a problem when you have a hierarchy of grievances and then you put in race-based programs to address the hierarchy of grievances, and we somehow attribute people merit just because of their racial ancestry, which I believe is what we used to call racism, instead of just merit on the basis of merit alone. We've decided that being discriminated against makes you virtuous. And so people like to adopt that virtue by claiming that they are part of a discriminated against class. And here we are. And so often they have sort of these liberal leanings, these people who believe in anything but meritocracy. They're the ones that end up being the fraudulents and fakers. And this guy's right in the Liberal caucus. Do you imagine, by the way, the firestorm if this guy were a conservative? We would never hear the end of it. But because he's a Liberal, they're like, no, you know what? He identifies as this, and let's just move on. All right. Let's move on to, speaking of real people being discriminated against, and not Mr. Saray, who decided he was a member of a minority class so that he could, I don't know, gain prominence in the Liberal caucus. real people, 6 million of them, were discriminated against by the federal government thanks to Justin Trudeau's discriminatory policies during COVID. And those were people who were subject to the inability to travel restrictions. You couldn't go out and eat. Many of you lost your jobs, fines and tickets. But Liberal MP Kevin Lamoureux says, thank goodness that those people were marginalized from society, that they were cut away from good, virtuous people like him, because if you made a medical choice that was different than his, you were somehow just a far-right conspiracy theorist. Let's show this clip.
And I just want to know, how much money did they spend on these studies to support this Arrive scam when they knew that they didn't have the science to even support it from day one?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Madam Speaker, the mega conservative far right is coming out. These are the anti, these are the ones that still deny the pandemic. And at the end of the day, thank goodness it was that Canadians and the majority of the people in the House saw the value of protecting the health and well-being of Canadians, and that the far right was marginalized back then, Madam Speaker, because as a direct result, more people are living today in Canada. As a direct result, a lot more people were healthier during that process.
I mean, I suppose that is true if you don't take into account all the undiagnosed cancers and then the cancers that didn't get treatment because we wanted to keep those hospitals empty. And then I suppose that would be true too if we didn't take into account all those excess deaths that nobody can seem to explain. Then if you just ignore those things, then yes, people are healthier. If you ignore the mental health crisis on young people that were isolated for upwards of 3 years, then yeah, I guess Canadians are healthier, or the obesity epidemic because they all just Uber Eats and chilled. Then yeah, I suppose we are healthier. But yeah, I'm not taking advice about health from Gollum there, by the way. Let's also go into another crazy Liberal video. It's Liberal Immigration Minister Mark Miller making wild and crazy claims about the state of Israel. I know that we call them the Liberal Hamas Caucus, but this is Hamas propaganda at its finest. I mean, this could have been straight out of the PLO media office. Let's show this clip.
I undertook with my cabinet colleagues to help push the local authorities, including Israel and Egypt, to make sure that we could facilitate their transition into Cairo and then complete biometrics and then to Canada so that they can be in safety. So it's very frustrating to me. I don't want to put together a program that is failing, but we are all failing Gazans at this point, and I think that is something that we need to realize. They are under, it's probably the largest hostage taking right now in the world. And it is something that if Canada can play a small role in it, we can't be everything to everyone, but if Canada can play a role in this, in getting people out and safe, we're willing to play it. But right now, we haven't had the success that we wanted to.
If the Gazans are being taken hostage, it is at the hands of Hamas. It's interesting that he says that that is the hostage-taking crisis happening. It's the Gazans. What about the Israeli hostages that are still being held in Gaza City, in the UNRWA hospitals? How about them? We didn't mention them at all. By the way, he said that we are facilitating the movement of Gazan refugees to Cairo, where they will be have their biometric records taken and then moving them to Canada. Why aren't they staying in Cairo? Why doesn't Egypt want them? Why did Egypt build the wall so high and then so deep into the ground? Why doesn't Egypt want them? For the same reason Canada shouldn't want them, and that is because, unfortunately, we cannot screen out the bad guys because I think it's 3/4 of Gazans are sympathetic to Hamas, and the support for Hamas has gone up since the October 7th attack that left 1,200 Israelis butchered and another 240, including women and children, kidnapped and taken into Gaza. So how do you screen for the safety of Canadians? I don't actually think they care, because there are a lot of concerns about the safety of Canadians back here at home. We have the just Chinese scientists running around with pockets full of viruses in Winnipeg. So I mean, just add it to the list of security concerns that the Liberals just ignore because they think it will benefit them somehow. But yeah, if they're being moved into Cairo for screening, why does Cairo want them continued to be moved out? That should be the question Canadians are asking these Liberals. And I think we know the reason why. One last thing before we move into this fun little story that everyone's going to be mad at me about. My email was, people were angry about it in my email. But let's go into this story from Holly Ann Doan. She is one of the publishers over at Blacklock's Reporter, great independent news network or news website. And I enjoy how hard they prickle against the mainstream media. The mainstream media sure dislike them. So, as you know, the CBC, there's Catherine Tate, the head of the CBC, who so deeply managed the CBC that, by the way, Tate is paid $500,000 a year with an additional 21% bonus. Tate also billed $119,309 in expenses over the past 2 years, including business class flights to Brussels, Geneva, Hollywood, London, Prague, and Tokyo. Access records also indicate 1,142 of the 6,262 employees at the CBC received bonuses last year. Payouts totaled over $16 million, or an equivalent of $14,000 each. But before Christmas, CBC was whining about chronic underfunding. And so the Liberals have decided to top them up to another $96 million. So another $100 million of your money going to the CBC to produce content you don't care about and pay bonuses to people you want unemployed. So the CBC budget will increase from roughly $1.3 billion to $1.4 billion. And don't forget, they get advertising dollars too. And they also get money from mandatory carriage, because if you have a TV, whether you just have the airwaves or you have cable or satellite, you are forced to take the CBC. And so they get money for that too. And they were threatening massive layoffs. And so Justin Trudeau said, oh, no, my press secretaries, they cannot be laid off. We need them. We are doing worse than ever in the polls. And so we need all the help that we can get. And so the CBC just got their payoff. They know what to do. They know what to do. And boy, are they going to use that $100 million to attack regular people even harder than they normally do. So hunker down. We're in for a real deluge of Justin Trudeau love letters from the CBC, and they are going to be going after his critics like their jobs depend on it, because, well, wouldn't you know it, they do. All right, we're at the top of the hour, but I just want to touch on this quick little story here. And the reason I want to talk about it is because I follow the facts wherever they take me. And sometimes you guys don't like that. But the moral of the story is that I come by my opinions honestly, and I'm not going to sugarcoat things for you, even though it might burst a few bubbles. It's this story I wrote up yesterday. Got everybody mad at me. Sorry, it's just taking a second for me to load. a PPC candidate from 2021 is the suspended D&D, so that's Department of National Defense employee that is embroiled in the ArriveCan scandal. David Yeo, the People's Party candidate for West Nippian in the 2021 federal election, is also the CEO of Dalian Enterprises, which received $7.9 million for its work on the ArriveCan app. But this is not the only time this guy received federal money. David Yeo's candidate website boasted of being against mandatory vaccine passports. At the same time, his two-person, Indigenous-owned company made millions on the mandatory government travel surveillance app used to quarantine and fine returning Canadian travelers during COVID lockdowns. And all this happened thanks to race-based contract awards. We just talked about this. Yeo was the People's Party candidate, and he's the CEO of Dalian Enterprises. Okay, we already read that. Due to the serious nature of the concerns raised, the DND is launching an internal investigation into the matter, said a department spokesperson to CTV. The individual has been suspended while this investigation is underway. We're in the process of suspending contracts with Dalian. According to the Globe and Mail, Dalian was awarded the contract as part of a federal government program aimed at giving preferential treatment to Indigenous-operated companies. And Dalian's website also claims the firm is veteran-owned. Now, this is where things get hanky. Through joint ventures with another company, Corridix, the two-person company has received numerous federal contracts, prompting a review of the procurement process favoring Indigenous bids. The two corporate entities together in their joint ventures have received a combined $400 million in federal contracts. In an all-candidates debate in September 2021, Yeo railed against the notion of proof of vaccination and the burden the discriminatory policy would place on service workers. The website listing Yeo as a PPC candidate in 2021 describes him as an entrepreneur, war veteran, a direct descendant of a treaty-signing First Nations Indigenous chief, Robert Franklin, who was his great-grandfather. On his website, the reasons for running were to ensure every business is essential and end the lockdowns, because the PPC is against mandatory vaccination, mandatory vaccine passports, and the PPC supports pipelines. So this guy was enriching himself, at least to the tune of nearly $8 million on an app that forced Canadians into quarantine and forced them into fines. And it was essential in ensuring parts of the lockdown. And I say this because just because somebody is on your team, PPCers, or because they claim to be part of the greater conservative movement, doesn't mean they are not worth your scrutiny. Just ask Jason Kenney, right? And that is not to say that somebody cannot be worthy of redemption after the fact, but this guy was running his mouth out one side, saying, I'm against mandatory vaccination and lockdowns, while getting federal government contracts to be part of the lockdown app that surveilled Canadians. All I'm saying is, at Rebel News, even if it makes us some enemies, we're going to follow the facts wherever they are. You might not like it, but it is our job. I think part of my job here at Rebel News is to drag the conservative movement itself, because I don't have a vested interest in any party. I don't actually trust politicians all that much, and they continue to let the normal people down. But I think it's our job to continue to drag the conservative movement back to the right, be a voice to the right of them, because everything else is on the left of them. The CBC, the media, the culture, the activist class, academia, they're all on the left, and they drag everything to the center. And it's our job to bring them back to the right. And, somebody sent a tweet to me yesterday and said, what's wrong with conservatives that they can't even, especially in Alberta, what's wrong with conservatives that they can't get a leader to last one term? Basically saying the NDP, Rachel Notley could have been leader forever. They never would have turned on her. And I thought, actually, that's a really good quality about us. It sort of makes us unelectable sometimes, but it's really a good quality that Conservatives have, morally speaking, that the left really doesn't. You look at Justin Trudeau and all of his scandals, and is he facing really leadership challenges from within? Is he facing a movement to get rid of him? No, not really, not organized. I mean, there's some rumblings here and there, but not like Jason Kenney, not like Alison Redford got here in Alberta. Alberta's a place where if our Conservatives aren't conservative enough, we boot them out. And lots of times we even start a new party, Reform, Wild Rose, United Conservatives. That's what we do because we don't abide blindly following a leader just because he's on your side or on your team. Conservatives tend to be loyal to the ideas and not the party, which means that they are a moral and principled people, but it also becomes hard to elect them because they start fighting with each other. But that is the thing about individualists, right? It's just hard to get us going all in the same direction. I should check to see if we have any chats. Olivia, do we? Couple. Right. Oh, okay, great. I heard that lawyer Chad Williamson is in the YouTube chat. That's interesting. Hi, Chad. I don't get to see the YouTube chat as it goes by. Shadow 9449 asks us if there's any Brian Mulroney talk, probably worth a mention. Yes, Brian Mulroney passed away yesterday. Isn't it odd that Brian Mulroney has passed and yet Jean Chrétien lives on? And, say what you will about Brian Mulroney, and I know I've said some things. Could we perhaps shut our mouths while his family is dealing with his passing? The gruesomeness on the internet, I don't know, just don't. It's gross. I'm sure Ezra will have more to say about Brian Mulroney. He'll probably tweet about him a little bit. But yes, he passed. There's his prominent Jalen O'Chin. And, he was the Prime Minister of Trade Talks with the United States, ensured that we had good relations with our largest trading partner. I think he's the acid rain Prime Minister also. You know how we don't talk about acid rain anymore? That's Brian Mulroney. It was a real pollutant, not like carbon dioxide. And he worked to make sure that, our landscapes and our cities and our crops are not destroyed by a very real pollutant. Brian Mulroney was part of solving that problem. So, he was, I think, maybe one of the last true environmentalists that actually solved like a real problem that was affecting both our nations. And he fixed it, or at least laid the groundwork to fix it, while Justin Trudeau fights the air that we breathe. University gives us $5. How many more scandals will be uncovered before JT does the right thing and steps down? You know what? I think he won't step down. I think he's going to ride this out to the bitter end. I think the talent pool is quite shallow within the Liberal Party of Canada. I think anybody now who might have been a prospective replacement, like Chrystia Freeland, they're too tainted by Justin Trudeau. They're just too painted with the same scandalous brush as him. And so they'd have to go from without the party. And I think that would probably be Mark Carney, who has sort of painted himself as the reasonable foil to Justin Trudeau's comic buffoonery. But don't kid yourself, Mark Carney is an eco-radical, I think, far worse than Justin Trudeau. Like, Justin Trudeau just thinks that CO2 is a pollutant. Mark Carney is instrumental in debanking and de-insuring energy projects. That's one of the things he does with the United Nations. So he's smarter, but sometimes that might mean smarter as in cagier and more conniving. Pamela for Freedom gives us $10. God bless you, Sheila, to be a fearless truth teller. The truth is getting stronger and their lies are getting weaker. Well, I hope so. Some people don't like hearing the truth, though. They'd prefer a sweet, sweet lie or just for me to ignore the truth. But that's okay. That's okay. I've got tough skin. Lisa Proust or Proust. Lisa, I haven't seen you in a while. I'm sorry David's not here to be a feast for the eyes for you. $10. Thank you, amazing Sheila and the whole team for your constant amazing work. Much love and admiration from Bad Montreal. Well, Lisa, thanks so much. I haven't heard from you in a while, but I'm glad that you're still a loyal listener and viewer and contributor to the show. We couldn't do it without people like you. And really, frankly, all of you, even those of you who just watch the show and then share the show. Tell other people about the show. That's worth something too. That's word of mouth advertising that money can't buy. Olivia, is that it for the show? Okay, great. Let's go out on this clip from Scott Adams talking about Bill C-63. That's the Online Harms Act. And he cannot believe that it is real. He can't believe that there's like a pre-crimes law coming. And that we will be retroactively hauled before human rights tribunals for the things we did in our past to hurt other people's feelings and could be subject to house arrest for things we might do in the future to hurt other people's feelings. So they've got our past and our future. It's all under control of Justin Trudeau. You'll get life in jail or house arrest or $20,000 in fines, death by 1,000 cuts for us here at Rebel News who go around hurting people's feelings all the time with the truth. So we'll go out on that. Thanks to everybody who tuned in today. Thanks to everybody who works behind the scenes in the office at Rebel HQ and around the country to make sure the show is there for you when you want to click on it. Thanks to lawyer Chad Williamson for being in the YouTube chats there. And thanks for being such a fighter for freedom and a true believer in the mission here at Rebel News. Thanks to everybody who chipped in. Every little bit helps keep the lights on here at Rebel News because we'll never take a penny from Justin Trudeau because, right, like how could we hold him to account if we did? Mainstream media. I guess that's it. I'll sign off the way David Menzies always signs off, as a salute to my friend who's out in the field today. Stay sane.
Now, here's a story that I swear to God, I can't believe it's true. But, Jordan Peterson was interacting with a story and there was a source was shown. So maybe it's true. Canada is introducing the Harms Act, where the government can put you under house arrest or make you wear an ankle bracelet if someone else believes that you might in the future write something hateful online. What? If somebody thinks you might in the future write something hateful online, Canada can put a bracelet on you and give you house arrest. How can that be true? I'm going to put a stake in this story and say it's not true, that there's something missing. Now, I saw the source, and it looked like an official bill. There's something wrong.